Greetings, people of the interwebs. Jake here, and welcome to episode 2 of Travel Talk, where basically this is a new podcast that I'll be doing here on the channel just every now and then, kind of, whenever I feel like it or whenever I have a guest available, where basically me and my guest will talk about some of our favorite traveling experiences, whether it be domestic, international, or, even just trying like a new restaurant across town that we really liked. For those of you who don't know, the first episode I had some friends on, and we talked about their recent road trip around the U.S. It was a lot of fun, so check that out. I'll leave a link in the description so you all can not have to search through all the videos and find that. But anyways, without further ado, is my guest Paul Hawkins. Welcome, sir, and thank you for agreeing to be a part of this.
Oh, no problem. It sounds like a really cool idea, so I'm glad I could be a part of it.
So I guess, tell the viewers about your podcast that you have of your own and, where they can find you on the social medias.
Okay, sure. I am part of the Blokebusters podcast, which is a podcast where we basically just sort of do film review in a kind of long, rambling, informal way. And we've also done a bunch of other little things that we're kind of pleased with. We do a film spotlight where we get a guest on and they talk about a film that they love and a film that they hate, and we don't find out what it is they're going to talk about until we're recording.
Oh,
and we've actually had a couple of really cool guests on. We had John Bailey, who is the voice of the epic movie trailers, and we've also had Adil Rafai from Hello from the Magic Tavern on. So it was
cool.
Really cool that we do that. And we've got a few other things that we do here and there, but mostly talking about film or TV. It's that's our wheelhouse.
Cool.
And you can find us on Twitter at Blokebusters, Facebook Blokebusters, or on Instagram. I'll give you one guess as to what we are on there. And if you want to email us, sort of do a really long form conversation, you can do blokebusterpodcast@gmail.com, because I forgot to put the second S in when I registered the email, and I can't be bothered to change it at this point. So
totally understandable. So you mostly have your podcast on iTunes, or like what other format can they find your podcast?
Pretty much anywhere that you can get a podcast, you can find us. I know we're on Stitcher, fairly certain we're on Player FM. We're pretty much anywhere at this point.
Cool. So with introductions out of the way, how about you tell us about your travel experience, where you went, and just your overall thoughts?
Okay, sure. I was trying to think what would be a really good pick here, because I've been to a few places, kind of your typical. I've been to Orlando, Florida several times with my family, and also now with my wife, now that I live in the US. I've been to Canada a few times, and I've been around Europe, and I was thinking, well, what would be a good one? But then I was thinking what would probably be the best is to talk about a trip that my family would always take once a year when I was growing up. We would get pulled out of school a day before the half-term holidays, which for people that don't know what that is, twice a year in the UK, there will be a week off school, which is just halfway through a term or semester, however you want to call it. And so the Friday before that, we were pulled out of school, which meant that I never got perfect attendance all the years that we did. Not that that was a sticking point for me, but anyway.
I still imagine that's a pretty good deal, though, to where it's kind of like, because obviously, like anytime in school, regardless of what grade you're in, right before the holidays, that's when everyone gets super excited, because you're kind of like, just gotta make it through this one last week, and then like Christmas break or whatever break it is, and you get super excited. But the fact that you got to leave a day earlier, I imagine that just got you more excited, and then your friends are probably more envious. It's kind of like, dude, your parents basically excuse you from school every year for this.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it was really cool. We would get packed the night before, and then we would just all clamber into the car and drive for. It was a 7-hour trip, 6 hours of driving and 1 hour stopping at a little chef on the way so that we could get something to eat for lunch. We would go up to a place called Pickering in the county of Yorkshire. and there was actually a farm out there, and the people that owned the farm had built, they'd either built or they bought some cottages that were connected to it, and so they would rent them out, and we would always have the same one, and it was my family and another family, and we would always go together, and like we went from like when I was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old until I was about 16, 17. In that time, like it was every single year we did it, and it was always a lot of fun doing that. So I figured this would probably be the best holiday to talk about. I'll grant you it's a series of holidays over the years, but it was always the same destination, so I figured I'd be able to get away with it.
So, like, was this something that, did you have family like in Yorkshire, or is it just one of those things where your family were like, hey, it seems like a nice place to just kind of kick back and relax for a few days?
Yeah, you know, I honestly don't know why they picked that location. As far as I know, we had no family that lived like further north than Newcastle, so there's no link there, and I have no idea how they found this little cottage at a farm at a place called Pickering in Yorkshire, which is kind of in the middle of nowhere, but they did, and it was just something where, like I said, we would always go up there, and we would just, every morning we'd wake up, and then it would be, okay, where are we going today? And so much to do in Yorkshire that we always found something different to do every year we went up.
But also go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I don't know where you'd want to start with that, but I have a few sort of interesting tidbits from that area, so I could start talking about that, or if you had any more questions at the start here.
Well, I was just going to say that, like, just from my experience, like, traveling, mostly international, because, like, it kind of dawned on me recently that I've, like, for as long as I've been living in the U.S., I've traveled, like, international to, like, more countries than I have states. Like, I have more, like, a vast understanding and knowledge of, like, other countries around the world than I do, like, other states. And some of the states are, like, right next to the one that I live in, so it's just kind of like, hey, man, tell me about, like, you know, Missouri. And I'm like, St. Louis is there. It's part of the Midwest. And it's like, okay, that it? Pretty much. It's like, okay, tell me about, like, Norway. Well, Norway's in Northern Europe. They're of a Germanic people, of course, and they were part of the whole Viking, culture back, like, in, around 1000 AD. Of course, we all know that. So, like, I could just go on about, like, European, like, history or, history and cultures across the world, but again, like, another state, it's kind of like, tell me about Florida. Not my thing. Too hot and sunny. I'm very pale. I'm Irish. I'm a ginger. So hot and sun, we don't mix well with that. So that's also kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to start this is, because again, like when I had my guests over for the episode 1, and they were telling me about their road trip across the U.S. It was really informative for me because I've always wanted to do a road trip across the U.S. And so, like, some of the places they were talking about, like, they were like, yeah, these super, really small town, like, unexpected places, which are some of my favorite whenever I travel, is, like, the small little village you'd come across in just to, like, fill up on gas or something. And you're like, this village is really nice. You want to just, like, explore here for a couple hours. And then that couple hours turns into, like, a whole day where you're like, oh, my God, this place is so beautiful. Look at all the things to do here.
Yeah, man, I love those sorts of places. Like Pickering's kind of like that. It's a town that is, like I said, kind of in the middle of nowhere if you don't know the area, and you wouldn't think there's much there. It's a really old English town, so like people in America, I don't think they fully understand what an old English town is like, because it's so small and all the houses are really small, that people over here don't seem to comprehend that it can be like that.
But that's part of the charm of, like, why I like, because back in 2014, me, my oldest sister, and my older brother, like, we did a road trip around the UK. We landed in London, Kind of went like a little bit into the Midlands, but mostly just kind of like went to Wales. Then from Wales went to Northern England, up into Scotland, and then kind of back down to London. But we did, when we were in the rental car, train, we pretty much took everything: train, plane, car, boat at one point. But basically, that was one of my favorite things, is driving through the countryside and just passing through these tiny little villages and like towns where everyone was like so absurdly friendly, where it was almost kind of scary, because like, wow, everyone's just so incredibly nice. It was incredible. Like, obviously, that's the best experience you can have when you're traveling, when you're in like a completely foreign location, know nothing about it, and people are just like, "Hey, how you doing, man? Like, you hungry? I just made a pie. You want some pie?" And you're like, "Wow, sure, thanks. Wow, I mean, I'm a complete stranger, and you're like letting me in your home to eat like a slice of dessert or something." But that was one the charm about like some of those tiny little villages, like in the UK or Ireland or wherever, is just everyone's so humble, so friendly. Like, everyone would like wave when you drove past them. And me being, because I grew up in a very rural area, so I'm more comfortable like in the like kind of out in the countryside, or like doing outdoorsy stuff like hiking, more so than like the big cities.
Right.
So like London, I liked London for a couple of days, and after that I'm like, I gotta get out of here. It's too much going on. Same thing with like Paris or all the other big cities I've been in. Like, they're nice for a couple of days, then I'm like, all right, let's go hiking out in the countryside and meet some of the locals at like the nearest pub.
Right, yeah, you would love Yorkshire then, if you had time to really delve into that area, because like they have a giant area known as the Dales, which is just hill after hill after hill of just roving green countryside. There's a road that we would take when we were going from Pickering to a town called Whitby, which for horror aficionados is the town that Dracula landed in England.
Really?
Yes, and also technically Nosferatu as well, if we're going to combine the two. But that's
yeah, they are interchangeable.
Yeah, there you go. And coincidentally as well, just completely out of the here, home of the cafe that served me the best Yorkshire puddings I've ever had. And I don't really know how to describe Yorkshire pudding very well, but just made out of batter, and they kind of puff up, and they're really light and fluffy, and these things were giant. They come to you on a dinner plate, and they're the size of the dinner plate.
Oh, wow.
And they are quite high enough that inside this Yorkshire pudding was a mound of mashed potatoes with about 3 sausages covered in gravy, and it was phenomenal. So
yeah,
that is going to Whitby.
That is one thing that I love about, like, especially the countryside of like England and stuff like that, is the meals are so hearty. Like an English breakfast, I'm just kind of like, this would set me for like an entire day. Like, this just, like, however big the plate is, it's like the cook would be like, we can't have an ounce of this plate showing. Like, shove everything onto that plate, like bacon, sausage, tomatoes, some kind of like bread, gravy. And it's just like, oh my god, it's so good.
Oh yeah, you gotta have the fried slice on there. Yeah, it's very, and some places are very particular. You go to some places and you order the full English breakfast, and they won't allow you to do any substitutions. You get what's on that plate.
Really?
Yeah, it's typically like really small places in really small towns. Like, it's just the English breakfast will be their signature. I'm trying to say that again. Signature dish, and it's like what you order, that's what you get. Like, you can not eat some of the things on it, but because it's just so much food, you don't really care. Like, it's just, all right, fine, I'll just push the mushrooms out of the way and I'll eat the rest. That's fine. But yeah, as I was saying, driving from Pickering to Whitby, you had to go down the only road that will connect the two, and it's just a long, meandering, like 25-minute drive of just nothing but open fields and one MOD base, which is just randomly there under a satellite, and then the rest of it is just gorgeous countryside. And it is kind of that thing. I know some people probably wonder, what if I break down here? And we're going to be stuck for a little
Yeah.
while. But at least you'll have some nice views while you're waiting to be rescued.
That is true. And also, like from my experience, in particular, like, because again, I don't think we passed close to Yorkshire, but like part of like that, I guess that general area of like northern England, kind of like when you're getting towards Scotland, where you get into like the higher elevation, like the just rolling hills. Like there'd be times where we'd be like driving through, there'd be like nothing. Again, it's just like maybe you'd pass through a couple little villages here and there, but for the most part, it's just like green, like few trees, hills, and I'm just kind of like. I feel like I'm a kid right now. I'm just kind of like, oh my god, look at that tree, and look at that hill, look at that rock. And I'm kind of like, just pull over, so I can like roll around the grass and feel like a kid again. Because I guess just, anytime I'm in like another location, sometimes even like, just here in the U.S. or something like that, I'll just come across like something, maybe not necessarily new, like obviously like there's plenty of, trees and rolling hills and stuff like that here, but maybe it's just the fact that like I'm fascinated with just being in a different country, where I'm kind of like, let me breathe in that fresh like English air. Let me roll around the grass and really absorb the culture that way or something. Or maybe it's just me trying to be a child because I'm more or less a child in a man's body.
Well, there is a certain amount of cultural osmosis that occurs whenever you go to these types of areas. I recently went to New Orleans and I came away basically thinking there's no better food on the planet right now. It's just some of that stuff was great. But yeah, and the area of Yorkshire is, as I've said, it's just beautiful driving through. And also, most of the areas around there, I don't know if you know, York was a castle town.
Yeah.
The wall is still up in a large portion of it, so you can go walking along it. Mm-hmm. And many of the other surrounding areas have castles in it. So, like Pickering has Pickering Castle. Mm-hmm. So every year we would end up going to Pickering Castle, even though we'd been every single year. So it's just one of the things we do now. And my parents like to tell me the story of I really wanted to. There's the area that you can walk around. Mm-hmm. You can see the walls and all of that, and then you can go up this staircase to get to the main keep, if you want to look at that. But there was this one section where it goes sort of down into a ditch and then back up a bank to the main keep area. And me being, I don't know, what, 6 or 7 at the time, I decided, I was probably older, but I'm going to say that I was 6 or 7. I decided that the best thing to do would be to run down and then up that. And supposedly I was halfway up when somebody came running and yelling at my parents that they needed to stop me and get me off of that immediately. I don't recall that at all. I just remember enjoying running around in that area, and obviously I was a kid.
Do you remember your first do you have like that first vivid memory, like when you first went to like Yorkshire and like Pickering, where like you were because I think you said first went there when you were like between 6 and 7, correct?
I might have even been younger than that. I know that it was a really long-standing tradition that we went. I think I was ridiculously young the first time we went, and there's no way that I would remember, but I kind of think I've trained myself to pretend that I remember. Because the place that we stayed at, like I said, it was a farm, so in addition to the cottage and the swimming pool that they had set up, they had goats, they had horses. Well, they had a horse, and then they got some more. They had donkeys, they had pigs, and they had chickens. And so it was this thing where every morning I would get up earlier than any kid would reasonably get up when they're on their holidays, and I would go out and help with the animals in the morning. I'd help get the eggs from the chicken, I'd help clean out the horse and donkey stables and all of this sort of stuff. It was, I genuinely don't know why I started it, but I enjoyed it so much that I did it every single year for the whole week that I was there.
I think that's more impressive because as a child, I love like animals. So I wouldn't have I could have cared less about like helping the farmer or whatever. I've been like, let me pet them all. Let me like help. Look, can I ride that horse? Can I ride the chicken? It's like, whoa, kid, calm down. Like, no, you can't ride all the animals. You can't pet all the animals. It's like, you want to help me like clean up after the animals? I'm like, no.
Yeah, I like I said, I don't know why I enjoyed that so much, but yeah, I think maybe it was just because I got to be in the area with the animals. Like when I was cleaning out the donkey and horse stable, the donkey and the horse were there.
Yeah,
they were right there. When I was helping to feed the pigs, I was standing next to a pig that was nudging me out of the way so I could get to the food. I would go in with all the goats and just be in that area. So it was just kind of cool. I really enjoyed that, and I don't know why.
I imagine the owner enjoyed it too. It's kind of like, I can't wait for the summer when that kid comes up here and he helps me take care of the animals.
Yeah, I think maybe when I was older that was the case. I'm sure I was a bit more of a hindrance when I was starting to do that, because then you've got to really worry about this 8-year-old kid trying to help out with these goats that might butt them at any moment, or
that's true. But
the donkey might kick them.
It's still the fact that like you were so eager and I guess willing to help out. That's like, oh, thanks, kid. Like you could just watch me do this, but the fact you're willing to help, hats off to you.
Yeah, I always just kind of did it, and it wasn't until I was thinking back on it that I was like, I was basically just free labor for them for a week. In fact, on top of that, my parents paid for the privilege of coming up there so that I could then help out. Like,
it was all part of their plan.
I think so. I don't know. Maybe they were trying to get me to be a farmer. It just didn't work.
Yeah, maybe like every year, just kind of like, is he doing better this year? It's like, nah, he doesn't have what it's cut out to be a farmer. It's like, damn it. All right, I mean, we'll still keep coming back here, but that sucks. We wanted our son to be a farmer.
Yeah. That's all the eggs we could eat. Yeah, it was really interesting because I always think back on it, and it's like, oh, we would do this, this, and this. And then I try and think of what would I do if it was just me and now me and my wife and daughter just going on holiday. What would we do? And I can tell you one thing: going to a farm would be nowhere on that list. It wouldn't. And despite the fact that I apparently enjoy it a lot, so I find it very interesting to think back on it and just go, this. It kind of feels like that was just like a part of growing up, was that my parents would take me to a farm and we would just enjoy it immensely. So
is this an area that like you've taken your wife and daughter since, or is it something that like you plan on doing at some point?
Well, I can tell you that the farmer that did own that area has since sold it. So I wouldn't be able to go back to that exact place. And we have been to York because I obviously talked about it with my wife, and when we were still like over there, we would talk about it, and then one weekend we went up there. We actually got the train from King's Cross Station from there to York. So it was a really cool. It was like I think about 3.5 hour, pretty much straight shot train ride, and you got to see the housing just kind of fade away as you started getting into the countryside. So that was a lot of fun. And we stayed in a little hotel in York, which was, I think it's actually the oldest hotel in York. I wish I could remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I can't. But it was right in the city centre.
I'm going to have to really Google that and insert pictures of it in the when I actually edit this video.
Yeah, I'll try and see if I can remember the name within the next couple of days so I can get that to you. And yeah, it was great. And the reason we went there, the time of year we did, is because we went to see the pantomime in York, the York Panto. Now, I don't know how many people will know what a pantomime is, and it's kind of difficult to explain because it is a uniquely English thing. There are some things that are always present in a pantomime.
Mm-hmm.
There's always having to yell to the people on stage that the villain is behind them.
Mm-hmm.
And what will happen is every time you do that, the villain will duck either behind something or will duck off stage.
Mm-hmm.
They'll all turn around, turn back, and go, "There's no one there." And then the villain comes back out again. There's a lot of that sort of stuff, and it's just so ingrained in English culture that like every town basically that has any sort of stage,
Mm-hmm.
there will be a pantomime there. There was a place near where I grew up. They had a pantomime, and every single year it was like a different B-list celebrity was in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get into the bigger towns and they've got the big one. But the York Panto is regularly in the top 10 attractions in the UK.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal thing. That they put so much love and energy into this thing, and there are people that trek from other countries to come to this panto. It's
Damn.
really, it's really good. And the team that they built there, like the Dame, who,
Mm-hmm.
for those of you that don't know, the Dame is a guy that is dressed as a woman, and it normally plays the mother of the main character.
Mm-hmm.
The Dame is the person that has been writing and directing it since it started, and he's been doing it, I think, about 28 years now.
Wow.
And and then the person that plays the brother of the main character is someone that he's been working with now for like 25, 24 years, and the villain's been doing it almost 20 years. Like it's a really close-knit group of the same people, and we got to see that. I think a couple of the people involved in it are either starting to get in ill health or starting to have issues with being able to do it. So I don't know how much longer it's going to be running as is. So I really want to take my wife and daughter back within the next year or two to be able to see it again. I don't know how we're going to do it, but I'm going to work it out. Damn it!
And for those of you listening, if you plan on going to the UK at some point, there you go. There's a prime location for maybe a place that wouldn't have necessarily been on your list of places to travel to, like at a UK tour or something like that.
It's one of those things that most of the people I went to school with don't really know about it because obviously I grew up. Well, not obviously, but some people might be able to tell from my accent. But I grew up in the southeast of England, and so a lot of people don't just go to York. They're not up there a lot, so they don't really know what's going on up there. But yeah, I would tell everyone about the Panto, and they would kind of. Well, I think they would look at me in a way that says, like, "Oh, we're kind of envious of you," but they probably looked at me in a way that said, "Shut up about the Panto. You keep telling us about it."
But that's another thing that I like about traveling is, like, some of my favorite experiences are the kind of off the beaten path, or like the areas that kind of like fly under the radar, where it's like people know of, like, say, a certain town or location or something like that, but maybe it just doesn't get quite the recognition that like some of the bigger towns or attractions would get. 'Cause again, especially the ones where it's just like we pull off to the side of the road, it's like, what's going on here? Go into a pub and ask the locals. It's like, first off, give me a pint, give me like a local meal, like what's good to eat here, and then also tell me like what should I see while here? And then sometimes they'll be like, there's nothing. You're not missing much. It's like, okay, what is close by? And then other times people are like, really? You came here of all places? Why? It's like, we were hungry and the sign said you've got food. And they're like, oh, okay, well, while you're here, let me tell you about like some really good places nearby, or places to avoid or something like that. And it's kind of like, yes, tell me, bestow this knowledge upon me, so that way I'll be further enriched and enlightened, and can then pass this knowledge to other people when I talk about my traveling experiences.
Yeah, I will forever say, obviously I mentioned the Panto when I talk about York, but one of the other things I'll say is that they had a fantastic tea room there, which again, for those of you in America that might not fully understand what a tea room is, it's literally what it sounds like. It serves tea, and I mean proper tea, hot tea, in a teapot, and you can get these little tiny finger sandwiches there as well. But yeah, you go there, and depending on the place you go, because there are a couple of different ones in York, you either will go and you'll just buy tea, and it'll kind of be like the more tea you buy, the longer you stay there.
Yeah.
But there is one where you have a 45-minute time period that you can sit there, and you order whatever you want. But basically, from the minute you order, that's your 45 minutes, because they are so popular. They keep having people come in and go. So that was one thing I recommend for York. But another thing I would recommend that I don't know anyone else that's ever been is actually a place called Eden Camp. And Eden Camp is a place, I don't remember off the top of my head where it is based. It is near Pickering, I can tell you that much. But it is a war museum. And it is primarily a World War II war museum. When I went, they had a whole bunch of what looked like old sort of bunkers that were constructed that made people think they would be safe if a bomb dropped.
Yeah.
But you probably wouldn't. And in each of these bunkers, there were different things that you could go through. There were some that had old vehicles or weaponry from the wars, and then there was one where it was made to look like a street in London during the Blitz, and you got the smells and everything as well. And it was a fantastic museum. Like, if you ever were wondering what it would be like to be in England during World War II and to had to deal with some of these things, like, it was really well done, and I kind of wish I could go back there again, but I don't know when the next time I'll be up there will be. So anyone that gets the chance and is in the area, I really do recommend that.
And most, again, for people listening, most like museums and stuff like that, one thing they really like about England is a lot of them are free.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of museums here in the U.S., you have to pay, and most of them aren't that expensive. And I'm for the most part more than happy to pay for admission to like museums, just because I like to support especially history museums. I'm a big history person, so it's like I'm all for supporting this. People need to know more about history and the significance of certain events. But at the same time, it is nice to where you can just walk right into like a museum like about anything, like in England and stuff like that, and just kind of walk at your leisure. You're not on like a time, like you don't really have to you don't have a schedule. You're just kind of like, I'm just gonna walk into this museum, see what it's all about, and again, hopefully you'll walk in and come out with some new knowledge and be like, all right, cool, that was a good like 2 hours of learning about this particular part of history or something.
Yeah, and I don't recall if this one was totally free. I think there may have been at least one area that they charged a little bit more for, just so they could obviously make some money, but because it was a special thing that they were doing, I don't want to come off giving any incorrect information, so do double check before you go, just to make sure if you need to pay or anything.
But again, further entice people, like if of other places, if you're traveling in the UK, most museums are free.
Yes, definitely.
Which, again, especially the British Museum, my God, I could have spent like weeks in that place. The British Museum, the ones in London, are phenomenal, really. The Natural History Museum is so much fun to walk through, and the Science Museum as well. A lot of people don't really think about that. I got the chance to go with my fiance at the time, but obviously my wife. We went to a after dark thing at the Science Museum in London, and it was exactly what you'd want, really. It wasn't even like you can drink or anything like that. It was just you had to be over, I think it was 16, and it was from like
7 o'clock in the evening to 11 o'clock, and you had free reign of everything in there. So it was wonderful. It was about a third as busy as a museum normally is, and you actually got to be able to go and do all of the different things that you wouldn't get a chance to because there's so many kids and families in the way of everything. But yeah, it's always great when you get something like that. I know that there was an art museum in York actually that is very close to where the pantomime is, that we went through, and me being myself when I was that age, I wasn't that interested in the art museum, but now I would actually go and have a proper look through because now I kind of appreciate that type of thing.
Yeah. So I guess, like, what are some of the other big attractions that kept you and your family going to York, like, just consistently all throughout the years, outside of, like, the pantomime, and, some of the other, like, I guess, like, some of the bigger attractions, like, what were some of the smaller, more, I guess, intimate things to where, like, it always had that unique charm, no matter how many times you went there, you were like, this keeps me coming back, and it's great every single time.
Really, if you decide to go up there, just pick a random town and go. Number one, you'll get the aesthetic because they're all really old towns that have just kind of grown up as the population had, but they haven't really changed the look. So you got a lot of, like I said before, really small terraced houses that are all connected. That is something you don't normally see anymore. Normally houses are freestanding, or at least there'll be two houses connected and then space and then the houses again. But yeah, you'll go down a street and from the top of the street to the bottom of the street, all the houses are connected. It's really interesting to watch. But yeah, some of the things that we would go to, there's actually a railway that does go through Pickering, and it's called, I think it's the North York, it's either just the North York Railway or the North Yorkshire Moors Railway. I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head, but it's what's known as the Heritage Line, which means that it's kind of protected and the upkeep is really well done, and it's run by a railway trust. And I think once a year they do. Thomas the Tank Engine is he's the one pulling the train, and it's still the old steam trains that are pulling all of the carriages, and they're the really old school carriages that actually have like an old turn handle on the doors to get in and out, and the windows that you can push a bar and pull down, and that you can actually stick your head out of the window.
That's awesome.
Not that you're supposed to, but you can.
I mean, when you have the opportunity, it's kind of like, I'm going to do this. When in the world will I ever get to do this again? So yeah, I encourage it. People listening to this podcast, do it.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because when I was growing up, I remember when I was younger going from the town I grew up in to London, they still had the old trains where they had that, and then I remember they started phasing them out, and now that doesn't exist anywhere. There's no train you can get on outside of these heritage lines where you can wind down a window because it's just and you've got the really old kind of felt almost church pew-esque seats that you sit. I mean, anyone that's watched Harry Potter, that's the type of train it was. And that interesting fact for anyone that cares about it, that actually is the North York Moors Railway.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's the one that they used when they were doing the trip to Hogwarts. So, yeah, it was like that scenery, all of that stuff. That's York, everybody. So
good visualization.
But yeah, so that was always fun. And there was actually a really, really random thing which we kids, we loved it. There is a place that you go to. I don't know how much it cost. I couldn't even point to it on Google Maps at this point, but it was an indoor play area that must have been 2 or 3 stories high.
Wow.
And it was like one of those things that you would go, and they had a slide that went from the top level all the way to the bottom. Like it was Jungle Gym-esque type thing, but clambering up and through different things. And it was so much fun. We loved it. We would ask the parents to take us every time we were there. Like 2 or 3 times while we were up there every year, we would be saying, "Oh, let's go here." And the parents were like, "Well, we could go here or here. We want to go here. We want to go here." And we went up one year. We asked to go, and the parents told us that it actually shut down.
Wow.
Yeah, we were like, "Really?
How? How could a place like that shut down?"
And we were like, "Oh, damn it!" And then it was about 5 years later. We're driving through Pickering, and we see that it's open. Turns out our parents lied to us because they were fed up of taking us.
Okay, that makes sense, because I was going to be like, how could a place like that shut down? Like, that seems like almost like a dream for parents to be like, okay, let's take our kids there, wear them down, so that way they will fall straight asleep when we get home, and they'll be out for like 2 days straight, and we can actually enjoy, like, adult time.
Yeah, that was one thing. I was trying to think back, like, as a kid, I was trying to think, like, I don't understand why you wouldn't want us to do it. I mean, maybe they were getting bored of just sitting off to the side and watching
that's fair.
But yeah, like, now that I'm older, I can kind of understand, like, okay, we are at this area, there's so many other things to do, so many things that we would like to do, and you keep dragging us here. So, yes, I can fully understand why they did it. Not that I forgive them for it.
Oh, yeah, no, that's how dare they lie for, like, however many years. That's monstrous.
Yes, I know. But yeah, I would say Whitby, like I said, obviously home of that great cafe, but that is one of those towns. It's a fishing town still. So if you go there, then you get to watch at certain times. You get to watch the boats coming in, and obviously you get the sea breeze hitting you, and it's really an old school type of town. And there's also an abbey that's at the top of a hill there that you can go up to, and you can kind of have a tour around it. It's a really old abbey and really well kept. They've done a lot of good work keeping that one up there, just like Pickering Castle, actually. Like pretty much all of the castles in England are under heritage sites, so that they are relatively well kept, even though there's not a lot that you can do for the ones that are really dilapidated. But it was.
And I know or at least most of the castles that I toured, like you had to pay like a certain fee for. But keep in mind, people listening, like the fee is to keep basically for the government to upkeep the castles, because obviously they are heritage sites. So like even though like there'd be, cause I think I toured a castle in Wales that was probably more money than I normally would have paid, but I'm like, well, this is a really well kept castle, and basically they told us it's kind of like, yeah, I mean the money goes to the upkeep of this castle. So I'm also a big fan of like when I go to new places, in particular older cities or towns, the architecture. I like admiring like the older kind of Gothic or Victorian era architecture, and like again wherever I'm at, in particular the older parts of towns or cities, just because it's kind of like, man, they just don't build like churches or cathedrals or just houses like this anymore. So if there is a surcharge for visiting a castle, pay for it, because we need this stuff to last forever, or as long as possible anyways.
Yes, definitely. And when you're there as well, you can buy a souvenir. They've got loads of different things. Like you can get a bookmark which has a drawing of the castle as it was in its heyday, or you can do what I did one year. I bought well, I say I bought, my parents bought for me because I asked for it, a pen, which was a standard biro pen, but it's as if you took the ink part with the ballpoint and then put it through a giant orange feather.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like a quill.
Oh, cool.
And I decided, because I'm me and I don't really think things through, I thought, you know what, I'm going to take that into school, and that's going to be my pen until it runs out.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do that, and most of the teachers don't really bat an eyelid, but I had a geography teacher who was the kind of teacher that you really wanted as a kid. He might not have been the best teacher, but he's a teacher that kids like.
Yeah.
And he would give nicknames to everyone, and the second I brought that out, my nickname until the day that he was no longer a teacher at that school was Chief Need Big Pen. Yeah, it was great. I couldn't even, I didn't have a comeback for that at all. I was just like, that's fine. Yeah. I think I started saving it once it started running out. I just started saving it for geography class, just so I could keep that thing. But yeah, seriously, any of those sites, any of the heritage sites in that area, obviously got Pickering Castle, like I said, but you got the abbeys that are generally under that. The walls around York are technically controlled by them, but there's no charge to actually walk along them. So I think there must be something somewhere in York where they'll actually take donations and stuff like that. There is also the York Minster, which is the York Cathedral, and that thing's massive. It is huge. So yeah, anyone that's interested in touring those sorts of things, you've really got to go and give that a look. But yeah, and outside of all of that, the only other thing that we would really do up there was we would go for walks on the moors, walks on the dales. We would go, and obviously we were kids, so we're like 45 minutes in. Can we go now? It's so boring. Whereas, me now, I would be perfectly happy to go for like a 2-hour wander through this area. The only problem we ran into, which we ran into a lot, was that my mum would decide that she knew a better way to go, and she didn't. So we would get lost every now and again, and of course it was never Mum's fault. It was just that the path wasn't properly kept enough, or something like that. But yeah, it was anyone that is even considering going to north of Yorkshire, I really do beg of you, go and check that area out, because it is phenomenal over there.
So what about does that area have like any particular like local cuisines that are kind of specific to that area? Because I'm a big food person, and I also feel like when you try food from different cultures or countries, it's kind of a nice window into what those people are like. Because sometimes you can get a decent, and again, like you're obviously not going to understand fully because it's just food, but you'll at least kind of get like a decent, because again, like a lot of places in like England and like the British Isles and Ireland, the food wasn't very diverse in terms of like what there was to eat, but it's so good, very hearty though.
Yes.
And in my opinion, like I don't really understand, because I remember like a lot of people, like when I was going to tour around the UK, people were like, isn't the food bad there? And I'm like, I mean, it's not very diverse. I mean, obviously it is now, just because recent waves of immigration from other countries from all over the world. So even in the smaller towns, you'll have like a pizza shop or a Chinese restaurant or something like that. But authentic like English or Scottish food or Welsh or Irish or whatever, very very basic but hearty and delicious and so satisfying. And again, like that's just one of my favorite things, is because again, you can kind of get, okay, they didn't have a lot to work with, but damn, this is so good.
Yeah, no, I will say, obviously I mentioned before the Yorkshire puddings. if you get a chance, just Google Yorkshire pudding. They're normally really small, and you'll have them with your roast dinner on a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go to Yorkshire and you order something with Yorkshire pudding, chances are everything you order is going to be in the Yorkshire pudding, because they genuinely do just do giant Yorkshire pudding that they keep things in. I mentioned the mashed potatoes, sausage and gravy, just in that. My brother would also just get chips and proper steak chips, not crisps.
Yeah.
But yeah, he would just get those, and that would be in there, smother them in gravy again. But yeah, so that type of food is pretty much everywhere. Also, given that there's a lot of seaside town and stuff up there, fish and chips. Like, you want to go to a local fish and chip shop up there, because it will always be super fresh, it will always be fantastic, and it will always be swimming in grease, which is exactly what you want when you go to a fish and chip shop.
Like, I'm not a big fan of seafood, or really fish in general, but I do love me a good, like, fish and chips, like, when I'm in, like, again, an area like England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, because, again, it's usually fresh. Of course, really, it's so battered and greasy, it's kind of like, it doesn't matter if it's, like, 4 months old. This is fantastic, especially when you've had a bit to drink. Oh, greasy food, like, drunk food is the best food.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing for me that has ever rivaled kebab and chips is proper fish and chips still in the wrapping that you just pick open and you just start picking out. That's it's some of the best food that you really don't get here in America.
No.
For some reason, that hasn't caught on, and it really needs to.
Like, I've been to restaurants that, they're kind of like a British-themed pub or restaurant or something like that, and, they're fine. And I've had, like, some of their fish and chips just to kind of be like, okay, is this, like, real fish and chips? And I'm like, I'll eat the battered fish, and the fries might be, or again, fries, because that's what people call them here in the U.S. The fries might be good, but, like, I feel like a lot of times the fish is just kind of disappointing. I'm like, nope, I don't like it. This is not what I ordered. Like, it's what I ordered, but this is not real fish and chips. Please, I don't know. Not trying to tell your chef how to make its food, because I don't know how to cook, but it's not the same.
Yeah, it basically, what happens at a fish and chip shop is they turn on the oil fryer, and they then use that for like 6 or 7 hours without changing the oil. So by the end of the night, you're getting the oil that has just bits and pieces of all of the batter, and it just gets better. It doesn't sound like it would, but it does. It's just so good. And the other thing that is quite prevalent if you go around Yorkshire, I don't know how much it is in a lot of the south of England, but I haven't noticed it as much, are the types of food like flapjacks.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a flapjack?
I have, yeah.
It's so like that type of food. You go to a bakery anywhere in Yorkshire and you will find yourself a really thick bar of flapjack for not too much money. Sometimes it's half coated in chocolate, and I mean proper milk chocolate, not American chocolate, because there's really no competition there.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like, when I go to, when I do travel, to Europe, I always stock up on chocolate, because there really is no comparison to, like, chocolate in Europe compared to here. Even the chocolate that I like here. Like, I'm a big fan of, like, Reese's, but, like, when I go to, like, Europe, I stock up on one Kinder Eggs, because Kinder Eggs are apparently illegal here in the U.S.
I believe they are finally bringing them over.
Yes! Okay. Yes! Finally. Some sense has been talked into them. But outside of Kinder Eggs, there's just so many amazing, just chocolates, and, again, some of it's just basic stuff that you can get at a gas station. And other things, it's more, specific to, bakeries where they have their own special chocolates and pastries. But, yeah, that's one of the things where that's... Honestly, one of the things that I always look forward to, when I travel to, Europe, I'm kind of like, ooh, man, can't wait to taste the local chocolate.
Yeah, the best way I've thought of describing it is the milk chocolate in the US tastes about the same as dark chocolate in England. like the difference between dark chocolate and milk chocolate in America is the difference between like milk chocolate in America and milk chocolate in England. It's just so creamy,
Yeah.
and so nice. So, yeah.
And then it makes you sad. Like every time I come back here and eat chocolate, I get a little sad because I'm like, it's fine, but it's not the same.
Yeah, it's just not the same.
No.
Yeah, so it is interesting. I've seen that you can now get Maltesers over here.
Maltesers.
From time to time. It depends on where you go, I think, but you can get them. But yeah, it's really interesting to me just how different food is, and the sorts of things you can get over here that you can't get in England. And I don't know if it's because I mean, I'm sure a large part of it is because I grew up in England, but I don't know exactly why. But there's just so many things that I prefer about English chocolates and sweets than over here. The one concession I will make is Reese's Pieces.
Oh yeah.
I love Reese's Pieces, and they do not exist in England. So yeah, always a little sad when I found that out, because obviously I saw E.T. and he would give out those Reese's Pieces, and he'd be, "What's that? Reese's Pieces? What's
That's
that?"
a thing?
No, don't worry about it.
It's like, so Reese's, Reese's Cups, in like M&M form. Of course, what you could do is next time like you go back to England, I would stock up on a whole bunch of Reese's Pieces, and just like go like down the street, like like you'll basically be like the Willy Wonka of like every time you go to like a street, just be like, "Hey kids, Reese's Pieces." It's like, "What's that? Oh boy, do I get a treat for you?"
And then I get arrested.
Yeah, I was about to bring that up. It's like, well, I don't know the best way to like approach that without seeming like a creep, but surely. So maybe don't do that.
Yeah, very nice. just leave it in the middle of a street with a sign just like free candy.
Yeah, that might work out better.
Yes. Kind of be like a child catcher scenario rather than a Willy Wonka. Oh dear.
This took a weird turn.
It did indeed. But hey, that's the nature of the beast, really, and that's kind of why I love doing this sort of stuff, because you never know exactly where it's going to go.
Exactly. So what are some other I don't know, like, are there any other like unique charms or quirks about the area that like maybe differentiates it from other parts of England, or that part of England?
I can't say for certain about all of the area up there, because really I've only been to Yorkshire in that area of England. But one thing that was very different even from where I grew up was the types of things you run into where it is a one-lane road for many miles, and it's the type of thing where you'll be driving along and you'll start driving down this one-lane road, which might have a brick wall on both sides.
Yeah.
And you won't be able to see a huge amount of the road in front of you. So you basically just had to hope that you don't meet a car coming the other way, because not only is it a one-lane road, but it is a two-way one-lane road.
That was one thing I felt a little unsafe driving through the countryside and rural areas of the UK. Because, they're very narrow, which is weird, because out in the countryside, it's like, there's plenty of room for, like, a two-lane road. Whose idea was it to be like, we got all this room, one lane's fine.
Well, the one thing that you will see a lot, especially on one-lane roads, is there will be areas on both sides of the road just randomly, which are known as just passing spots. So anyone that coming down, there'll be two cars there, and whichever car is closest to the parking spot, it's just assumed they are the one that will go into it. The other car will go by, and then you continue on your way. And it's just kind of naturally accepted that that's what you do. And like you said, it's narrow over there, but one thing that a lot of Americans don't fully get, I think, is that cars in England are quite a bit smaller
Yes.
than cars in America, and I think it's something that Americans just don't appreciate about
Yeah. Well, I mean, we are
America,
kind of a
is that
car
everything
culture
is huge.
to a degree.
Yeah, yeah, and it's kind of interesting because I grew up in England and I learned how to drive about 6 months before I moved to America
Oh.
because I didn't need to drive.
Yeah.
I got the train wherever I needed to go, or I cycled, or I walked.
Yeah.
There wasn't a great need to drive.
Mm-hmm.
So I passed my test with 26 hours of driving experience,
Mm-hmm.
and I then come to America. And having driven on these little back roads and all of this stuff and learned how to drive going through some of these towns,
Mm-hmm.
and then I come to America, which I'd been to before, so I
Yeah.
kind of knew, but this was my first time driving on these roads. It's like, I have a lot of wiggle room either side of me. These lanes are massive,
Yeah.
not to mention the cars. So, yeah, I think it would be really interesting to be able to witness an American first taking a tour of somewhere in England, like rural England, and just be able to sit in the back of the car and just
Mhm.
watch them panic. Because I'm sure there's a fair amount of panicking that occurs in a lot of people when they realize just how small
Yeah.
some of these roads are.
Like, I liked it because most of the time, because I wasn't really driving much, it was mostly my older sister. And she has a bit of road rage, so that was kind of fun at times.
Yeah, yes,
But at the
that can
same
be a lot of
time, that is kind of the thing where it's like, in a way, I almost feel like Americans maybe shouldn't drive in the UK, just because, like, especially the rural areas where things are just very kind of relaxed. Like, I remember in, like, when we were driving through Wales, like, kind of one of those one-lane roads, is there were, like, signs, like, when we passed through, like, towns or villages, it's kind of like, you know, while you're driving, be sure to, like, drive slow and always be wary, because apparently, and, like, it had, like, a tally. It's kind of like X amount of, like, children, like, die every year from people, like, driving and hitting them. And I'm like, well, okay, you're kind of, like, that's because these roads are so narrow, and there's a lot of, like, windy curves, and there'll be, like, again, like a rock wall or something kind of obscuring, like, your line of sight once you turn around a corner. So it's like, yeah, if you hit, like, a goat or, like, a person, it's kind of like, well, what are you doing in that area? What are you doing, person? So we were kind of like, well, yeah, of course all these people are dying. It's like, expand the roads or tear down that wall so that way we can see across the bend there. But yeah, it's like, but also I think just me observing, like, kind of the beauty of the countryside. I'm like, oh, this is nice. But yeah, if you're one of those people that has, like, road rage, or you feel like you have to speed a lot, I would maybe get a chauffeur or let someone else drive, because you'll probably drive off the road or hit someone and cause, like, a whole thing. So maybe take it easy, because again, you're on a holiday. You know, why stress yourself out driving anyways?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, you definitely don't want to be barreling around some of these roads, because there are quite often a lot of roads that you'll have the edge of the road and then just a drop.
Yeah.
So yeah, you want to kind of keep a level head about you when you're going around some of these roads.
And a lot of sheep too, like, cause like here in the U.S., there's signs for, like, deer crossing. It's more sheep, because they're and sheep aren't always, like, fenced in, like, again, like livestock are here in the U.S. So, like, yeah, you'll see, like, a herd of sheep just, like, crossing the road, and again, like, imagine people, especially people who grew up in, like, a big city, would be like, what is this? Who's shepherding those sheep? Why are they not fenced in? What's going on?
Yeah, there was one time that we were driving somewhere and we were delayed by about 20 minutes because the sheep just decided to kind of stand in the road.
And they, again,
why not?
The sheep don't care, like, they have no sense of urgency. They're just kind of like, what? This is my road too, back off.
Yep, and yeah, it's really, really interesting just to kind of drive around, and you will see, like, very different. There are areas where the animals are penned in.
Yeah.
But down a lot of those country roads, and even sometimes in towns, because the only way to get the sheep from one area to another will be to walk them through the town
Yeah.
sometimes. You will find the occasional livestock causing a traffic jam. But,
But at the same time, that was kind of the charm for me, because like it's something like you see in movies where like it might take place in like a rural part of like the UK or something, and you're kind of like, well, how often does that happen? Where you're driving down the road and there's like the old farmer trying to shepherd his sheep, and you're like, surely that doesn't happen. This is just something that mostly happens in movies. Nope, happened at least 3 times in the UK in several different areas, twice in Ireland, and it's just one of those things where I was kind of like. Because also we weren't in a rush to drive anywhere, so we were just kind of like, sure, go ahead, take your time, sheep. We're just admiring the fact that this is happening. This happens on a regular basis, to where the old farmer dude has to shepherd his sheep across the street to get to another grazing area, and it's just like, I love this. It's just a unique little charm about these rural areas.
Yeah, and it's also something that you don't really think of, but. If you're living in those areas, you do take into account, well, around about this time, I need to factor in a 20-minute delay because there's probably going to be one. So there are a lot of people I find just getting to places quite early because they factor in a delay that isn't there in the end. Whereas in America, I feel that people tend to try and leave as late as they possibly can, and then speed to get where they're going.
Yep.
I don't fully understand it. And one other travel tip I will say is that in England, the posted speed limit is the speed limit. There's no you can go 5 miles an hour over. That doesn't happen. If you don't go the speed limit, you might get stopped.
Yeah. That's a very helpful tip, especially if again you're planning on doing like a road trip and driving yourself, which I think actually is a very rewarding experience to drive yourself. But I'd also recommend taking a train because the trains in the UK are very nice, and especially if you're going from like so I think we went from was it Bristol? Yeah, I think it might have been Bristol to. I forget what town, but like close to like Hadrian's Wall, like that part of northern England.
Okay.
Then I think we got in another rental car and kind of went into Scotland. But regardless, like I would recommend doing both just to kind of get like different experiences of traveling throughout the countryside and again passing through some of the towns and villages and even some of the bigger cities. Because I remember we drove through, like Liverpool. I think we drove through Birmingham as well at one point. So unfortunately, we didn't get to spend as much time in places that we would have liked to. But again, since I'm more of like a kind of being out in the countryside person, like if we didn't get to spend a whole lot of time in a city, I'm like, it's like any other big city. Like it accommodates for everybody. Whereas like the little towns and villages, I'm just kind of like, ooh, look at the architecture. Look at I don't know, like look at this really cool little unique restaurant or something.
Yeah, well, and fair enough. Although I will say, again, something that's kind of not fully understood in America is you can go from one major city to a major city that's like 30 miles away, and you will encounter a completely different accent.
Yes.
It's something that I'm firmly of the opinion that there are more accents in England than there are in the entirety of the US. And I don't know why that's the case, but I am certain it is. Because you could, as I said, you can drive 30, 40 minutes in any direction and you will hit a new accent.
Yeah.
By the time you get there. It's remarkable.
See, at first I was gonna say, well, that maybe that's due to like the various kind of people who've kind of colonized more or less like England, like different parts of England was kind of conquered or colonized by different like Germanic people or other people, like at one point like France controlled parts of England and England controlled parts of France, but then at the same time I'm like, well, the U.S. is just as diverse as like any part of England. So yeah, that is actually really fascinating that there's so many different dialects and accents in such a small country.
Yeah.
I'll be really curious to see. I don't know, like what the if anyone has any historical. I don't know. I guess like reasoning to that, or if it's just one of those random occurrences where it's like, yeah, no one knows what happened, but there's like 50, 100, 50 different accents in just like the span of like 7 miles.
Yeah, it's so weird, and the oddest thing as well is even just talking to me or my sister and my brother, we have fairly different accents. I have developed this one right here. It's probably one of the softest accents in England, whereas my brother and my sister, they have a way of speaking where they kind of picked up more of a Londoner
Yeah.
type of talking. And I don't know why, because we grew up in the same house. Like, it's not like we grew up in different parts of England. We grew up in the same geographical location, and we have different ways of talking. So it's very, very interesting. You don't quite find that over here in America.
So again, that's more reason why why England in of itself is such a fascinating country. Because in my opinion, it's produced the greatest music of all time. Like pretty much all my favorite bands are from England, and again, just such a vast, rich history. Again, pretty much since the beginning up until modern times, that England's had such a huge influence on the world as a whole. And again, me being the history person, I'm kind of just like, how does this tiny little nation have such a massive influence on like the entire world? But if you want to know the answers to that, you can just look it up because that'd be a discussion for another time. And
I was gonna say like the short answer is because they used to own most of the world.
Yeah, that is that is true.
Yeah, as Eddie Izzard said in one of his fantastic sentences, they conquered the world with the cunning use of flags. I claim this for England. You can't. We live here. Do you have a flag? Well, no flag, no country. You can't have one.
And I know John Oliver did a similar bit on one of his stand-up specials that I saw, where he was kind of comparing like the differences between like kind of the history of like the United Kingdom, in particular the British Empire and the U.S. And he's like, they're very similar, but like the way England did it is they did it. They're like he was like, imagine this: England, the British Empire was like Godzilla with a bow tie. It's like sure we waltzed in, we caused a lot of problems and destroyed stuff, but we did it with class. It's like, when we come into a country like, Africa, for example, he is like, hey, good news, everyone, jobs for everyone, and I won't take no for an answer. It's kind of like, yeah, that kind of, I feel like that is how, like, they did it. They would come into places, again, plant their flags and be like, this is ours now, because that's the way the world works. If you don't have a flag, it's not yours.
Yeah, and even with that, it's kind of interesting the way that flags are viewed, because over here in America there's a flag on literally everything.
Yeah.
My next door neighbor has a flagpole with a flag on it at all times. It's like, do you need help remembering what country you live in? I don't, like, growing up in England, the only time you see a flag is something to do with the royal family or on Remembrance Day or something like that. Like, people don't have flagpoles in England.
No.
It's not a thing.
Like, it's usually on, like, hotels or, like, government buildings that you will see, like, flags for the most part. But yeah, like, here in the U.S., and not just the American flag, but, like, every state has their own flag. So, like, some people have, like, a flagpole. It's like, they got the American flag. They've got the state flag. And then they've probably got another flag of maybe their favorite sports team or something. It's like, wow, that's a lot of flags going on there.
Yeah, it's very different. I mean, I would say that people in England can be just as patriotic as people in America. It's just that they don't display it at every opportunity.
Yeah, again, it's a bit more subtle. It's kind of like, yeah, cool, I'm all for patriotism. Whereas here in the U.S., it's kind of more like, yeah, patriotism. It's like, well, okay, yeah, I get it, patriotism. Don't get me wrong, that's great, but wow, you are very patriotic.
Yeah, and it really does kind of feel like in England, looking over at America and people doing that, it feels like most Americans are like the the rich Texan from The Simpsons.
Yeah.
And they're just firing the edges like, America. It's like, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
you have fun over there. We'll be here. Thank you.
Yeah. And even though that obviously isn't the case, it's a stereotype, I'll be honest, it's a fun stereotype. Like, there are even times where that's kind of how I see our country, especially with the current political situation. But that's a whole other thing. I won't get into politics. But
Trying to stay clear of that.
but yeah, there are some times where I'm kind of like, is that really how the rest of the world perceives us? Where they're just, and I'm like, well, I don't blame them, because sometimes we do pull off that stereotype well, even if we're not trying to.
Yeah, that is the biggest problem. I know that a lot of people have problems with stereotype, but Americans do more often than not actually live up to theirs.
Yeah.
So,
for better or worse.
I'm not trying to say that all Americans are the same and so on and so forth, but you do more often than not come across a gun-toting person in America.
Yeah. But I don't know. Since we're going on a little over an hour, anything else you want to inform the people about the charms and the beauty of Yorkshire before we start wrapping this up?
To be honest, I think if people aren't interested enough now, then I don't have too much more that I can put on the top of that. I would just heartily recommend anyone that's even considering going to visit England, do go to Yorkshire. Go to York at least. It's such a wonderful main city there. And it's just you'll see some fantastic countryside and just some fantastic old stuff. Like a lot of the buildings in that area are almost twice as old as America.
Wow.
Like as in the colonized America.
Yeah.
Like, just think about that. That is how old this area is. So yeah, it's well worth a visit.
And then imagine if you're a history fan like me, the fact that you get to see old buildings like that just excites you to no end. Because, again, just going to, like, old sites, or, like, whether it be, like, a battleground site or an actual old building, a castle, I'm like, oh my god, the history, the significance. Even if there's, like, nothing, hardly anything left of the castle, it's like, yeah, here's a stone that used to be a castle, like, oh my god, look at this stone! Think of what it was at one point!
Yeah, and that last factoid I'll give you, I do kind of remember this. The Pickering Castle, the main bit of Pickering Castle that you can go and tour now, was built in the mid to late 1100s.
So is it built by, like, the Normans or some of the other Germanic people, or is this, like, built by, like, some of the English kingdoms fighting against the incoming invaders?
I believe that it was originally built by the Normans. I think that was the original structure. The structure that we see now, like I said, sort of 1100, 1150, that time period. So I don't know English history as well as I should. So I can't tell you exactly which time period that is, but that is when that whole thing was made into what you can see today. So
awesome. And I guess before we wrap this up, again, why don't you promote your podcast, what you do on there, and all your social medias and where you can be found?
All right. Well, I'll try and get this done a little quicker than I did at the beginning. As I said, part of the Blokebusters podcast, it's myself and my friend Brian just talking film and occasionally other stuff. We actually just did a 2-part episode with a good friend of the podcast now, Janelle Megan, where we covered both seasons of Stranger Things.
Ooh.
In I think the longest episode we've actually released up to now. Both of them are about an hour and a half long. So
wow.
It was a lot of fun to do, and so that'll keep you entertained for a little while. And if you want to get a hold of us in any way, shape, or form, or even just follow us, because that'd be very nice of you. And if you could actually follow us on Facebook, we are at 99 followers right now. So I just want that thing to tick over to 100. It'd be fantastic. But yes, we are on Twitter at Blokebusters, Facebook.com/Blokebusters, Instagram at Blokebusters, You can email us, blokebusterpodcast@gmail.com. The website, blokebusters.webs.com. Not much, but it's something. And we are part of the Podbros network, so if you go to podbros.com, you can find us there as well as a whole bunch of other great shows.
Excellent. Now, is Blokebusters one word or two separate words?
It is one word.
Okay, fantastic.
Yes,
just wanted to clarify that before we wrap this up. But I'll be sure to leave links in the description so that way you fine listeners can find all of his endeavors and podcasts and projects and stuff like that.
You are so kind.
No problem at all. I imagine most of you who are listening to this probably already know where you can find me. But just in case, if you're a new listener, you of course can continue to subscribe here at Pasty Pell Productions and check out all the things that me and the Pasty Pell team do here, whether it be movie reviews, just podcasts about whatever we feel like talking about, music, movies, TV, what have you. And of course, the new addition here, Travel Talk. And you can also check out my other podcast that I host with my co-host Will, Shogun's Gateway to Anime, which is all about anime and where we review, rate, recommend, and just overall talk about anime. And you can also follow me on Twitter at IrishmanJake, and that wraps this up. So hopefully you all have enjoyed, and definitely look into going to Yorkshire if you're in the area or thinking about planning to go to England. So until next time, everyone, cheers.